But the biggest thing I tell people is, man, turn your home into your own farm and your own ranch. If you can have chickens, rabbits, grow whatever plants you can, as many as you can that grow in your environment that can sustain you, that is just such a powerful tool. Plus, the more they do that, the more you become in touch with nature and earth and you understand the whole life cycle. And it just makes you, I think, more appreciative of everything in life. And I think that makes you a better human being. So the more you can do to grow food at home is better.
Welcome to Brighteon.tv. I'm Mike Adams. Today we're joined by a very special guest, Mykel Hawke. He's the author of really an important new book that is especially crucial for our times. It's called Hawke's Green Beret Survival Manual. It's available right now at booksellers everywhere. It's not something that's coming out. It's actually out right now. And this is the first time he's joined us. He's agreed to share a lot of his information. He was a Green Beret. He was in the military from 1982 to 2011. Yeah, that seems like a long time, but yeah, he's gained a tremendous amount of knowledge about what's going on and also how to survive different situations, different deployments. But a lot of that translates into things that can help you, given what we believe is, well, already starting to unfold. So we're going to be joined by Mykel Hawke right after this short break. Stay tuned with us. You're watching Brighteon.tv. We'll be right back after this break. I'm Mike Adams. Stay with us. All right, welcome back, folks. Mike Adams here, joined by Mykel Hawke, and we're going to put his web address online because the spelling of his name is a little bit different from what you might be used to. We're going to bring him in just a second. MykelHawke.com, the author of Hawke's Green Beret Survival Manual, and also, just so you don't ask questions or send me weird letters, yes, I blew out a little blood vessel in my eye during a recent training exercise because I'm training in hand-to-hand combat again, and you always get hurt, it seems like, but that's just with the territory. So welcome, Mykel. Thank you for joining me today. It's an honor to have you on, sir.
Thank you, Mike.
All right. Well, so first, just give us a brief overview of yourself, your history, and your book, please.
It talks about survival from the perspective of doing amputations, cannibalism, but it also talks about nuclear, biological, chemical warfare. It talks about different types of warfare from coups to all out, insurgencies. And so I think because it had so much good info on it, that it was going for sale for a much higher price. And they said, you know what, let's just bring this book out. So now everybody can get a hold of it for a reasonable $20 price tag, I believe.
Well, I want to ask you specifically kind of some of the key chapters and what it covers, but here's the context where before your book might have been of interest to a lot of people thinking about America's projection of power overseas. Well, what's America doing in the Middle East? What's America doing in South America and so on? But now today with the strife and so much talk of civil war, so much talk of regime change, election rigging, everything else, I think a lot of people are very concerned that perhaps many of the things you describe in the book are happening or are about to happen right here at home in America. Go ahead.
Well, I think one of the reasons why I've been very passionate about survival, other than my reason for getting into survival in the first place, was because I had to survive on the streets as a 14-year-old kid. And when you spend a winter on the streets at 14, you kind of realize real quickly what you don't know. And so it became a lifetime pursuit and passion for me everywhere I traveled around the world, talk to the locals, talk to the elders, find out how they did primitive survival things. So that aside, the reason that survival resonates so much with me is that it applies to everyone, every day in every walk of life, regardless of your political ideologies. The bottom line is, the underlying premise is something all human beings have in common. And that's why I think the book it really resonates with so many people, especially these days.
Do you feel like there is quite a renewed surge or a first-time surge in interest in survival techniques, especially urban survival, over the last year or so because of what's happened under COVID, including the massive shortages that are now apparent to everyone? Have you seen a rise in this interest?
Well, having done it for nearly 35 years, I've seen the pendulum swing back and forth, and it absolutely correlates with people's worries and concerns about what's going on. So some, the millennial event, Y2K, that was a big one. Sometimes when you have like 9/11, that was a big one. When you have these big disasters, like you had the tsunamis, in Southeast Asia, that becomes a big one. And of course, something like this COVID endeavor going on, those absolutely make people more interested in it, which always excites me because the more interested they are, the more they learn, the better their lives are going to be. So I'm stoked.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some of the key chapters in your book that would be applicable to people right now in today's circumstances who want, not theory, they want practical things of how to survive what may be coming?
Well, I think the big thing for me, and it's the way I teach, it's the way I live, is keep it simple, stupid, always, and break everything down into manageable chunks. So I speak about what I consider the 8 pillars of survival, which is primary food, water, fire, shelter, and then you got medicine, communication, navigation, and security, right? So those are, for me, the 8 pillars. And within all of those, I break them down to a very simple level that makes it relatable and learnable by anyone and everyone, regardless of your age or sex, whether you're an urbanite or a rural dweller. So those are the main chapters of the book, but there's also a big chapter at the very beginning, which is a little bit about my background and why I got into it. And it's the psychology of survival. And then the last chapter of the book, which is the big one, I think a lot of people will find most interesting, which is, all those crazy disasters, diseases, and pandemic type things that apply globally.
The psychology of survival, I think that's really key. I don't know about you, but I've noticed in my lifetime, and I'm in my early 50s, but in my lifetime, I've noticed a real weakening of mindset especially among the younger generation today. I mean, literally, when I was a youth, me and my friends were way tougher than what I see today. Now, I'm maybe every generation thinks that about their kids and grandkids, but there's something missing in the mindset right now. How do you teach people to have that mindset like, I am not gonna die, motherfucker. We're gonna find a way to live and make this work? What do you think?
Well, I mean, it's a brilliant question, and I find that I often ask myself the same thing. Hey, wait a minute. Am I just getting older and crustier and just being like all the old guys when I was a young one, saying, kid, you don't know what it's like. You guys are all a bunch of weak sticks and we were tough as woodpecker lips. I don't know. I don't know what the reality is in there. I think it's in part some of that being an older person. But yeah, I think generations change, right? I mean, we had the hippie flower generation. We have the tough war generation. Now, I have a master's degree in family counseling, so I want to say that just to couch this. I believe that each generation is different. They'll face different problems, but they also bring different solutions. And while I might look at some of the kids and say, they seem a little softer than perhaps I was when I was younger, I'll also say that they're coming up with a lot of creative new ideas, a lot of new solutions, and it's like I've always said to Americans or foreigners when I travel, it's like, hey, you think Americans are getting soft? It's like, well, look, we've got it better than a lot of the rest of the world. We got video games, we got steak, we got donuts, we got pretty much whatever you want. And yeah, maybe the kids are glued to the couch a little bit too much, not getting outside as much as we used to. But by God, I dare you to come try and take it from them. I'll guarantee you they'll stand up and put some beat down on you. So I have faith in the next generation, and that's my hope.
Okay, great. Now, most people in America live in cities, of course, so it's true in every country, or almost every country, maybe not Papua New Guinea, but you get my point. Most people live in cities, and cities have all of these demands for inputs in order to be sustainable: water, power, bandwidth, fuel, food, all of these things. Do you, whether it's in your book or outside of your book, what's your advice to people who live in cities about how to face, the shortages we're already seeing? Food shortages, supplies, parts from China, glues and resins and plastics and all kinds of things. My sources say that's only going to get worse. And we've seen power outages due to hurricanes and things like that, and also power rationing in places like California. They've turned off the power grid. What's your advice to people in cities in an overview context?
Well, it's important how you're framing that, because you're right. More people live in the cities than not. And when you're in the cities, you have the same logistical requirements as everyone else, but a lot less of the support package, primarily in terms of space for storage of things, right? Likewise, if there is some sort of hiccup in the supply chain or the support of the electric grid or the trash and all those types of things, the collapse can be a lot more significant, a lot more quickly, right? So I do address it in the book. Everybody's got to size up what their situation is, how, what your time and dime is, how much money do you have, how much storage space, how many people in your family, how long do you need to get by? And I give general guidelines, like try to carry 24 hours worth of food and water on you, try to have like 3 days worth of the basics in your backpack, try to have at least 7 days worth in your vehicle or boat or aircraft, and then try to have about a 30-day lifeline of basic necessities in your home, wherever that is, however you need to store, right? And there's other guerrilla strategies like growing plants and different, people's pottery and stuff like that around the city where, you can go and harvest some potatoes or some carrots or something like that. But outside of that, what I try to remind people is like, look, when I was born on this planet, there were only 3 billion human beings. If I live a normal lifetime, when I die, there will be 9 billion people. And that is pretty significant when you look at it, like the entire existence of humanity, whether you believe in God or, dinosaurs. My lifetime, triple the population on the same globe. That's going to create a demand for resources. That's going to create shortages. That's going to create diseases as more people are in urban environments. And so all of these things that we're experiencing now are not abnormal given the wider context. So everybody should just accept that, hey, with population, there's going to come disease, there's going to come shortages. And so you need to make ready, regardless of what your politics and religious and educational beliefs. It's just a human necessity that Uncle Sam or big government isn't always going to be there to provide for you. The more you can take care of yourself, the less other people need to take care of you, the more you can help others. So that's kind of the general philosophy.
Well, I think that's a very powerful message. And I guess I want to ask you, what is it that makes people have blind faith in the government saving them? Now, ready.gov, I believe, still recommends a 3-day supply for all Americans. They're not willing to go beyond 3 days. Meanwhile, the government itself has bunkers, underground missile silos stocked with a decade of food and billions of rounds of ammunition and communications gear, right? So there's this incredible disconnect. The government says, well, we have to make it for continuity of government, COG operations, but if you die after 3 days, so what, right? That's kind of the message. How do you explain this to people?
Well, I'm not sure that that's exactly the message. I think what they're trying to do is give a reasonable recommendation that they think most people can sustain, again, given considerations to the cost of buying the food for long term and the space that you need to have, which frankly can be a luxury for a lot of people to just be able to store a month's worth of food, water, et cetera. So when I think they're given that recommendation, you got to look at what the baseline is. A lot of people don't make any plans whatsoever. So you're going to have the people that are going to go to the extreme and the people, way above. And then the people who, hey man, they don't even have enough food to wake up and eat breakfast in the morning as a regular part of their lives. Right. So I think it's not necessarily the government's giving disparate information to the public compared to what they're doing. They also have to prepare for exigencies, short and long term, small and large scale. So it's different planning considerations as well. So I just look at that as, hey, generally, I think, hey, you should watch your diet, you should drink water, you should eat well, you should sleep well. That's a general thing. Then what they make military guys do is a very different matter. But I don't think that they're necessarily saying we see ourselves differently. It's a different message for a different audience.
Well, I think I'm going to redirect to you on that question, because the government is, of course, buying their supplies by printing money. Now, if we could all print money, then we would all have a massive amount of supplies. So if the government wanted to, they could print money and ship like a 30-day supply of food to everybody. They did print money and hand out COVID stimulus checks to everybody, but people could spend those on whatever they wanted. And some people spent that money on lap dances, right? So, the government clearly is making decisions that preference their own survival and not really the public. What would you say to that?
Well, I'd fundamentally disagree, because the government survives primarily off tax dollars. And so that requires taxpayers to be healthy, thriving, working, paying taxes. So I don't necessarily agree that the government is intentionally trying to do the general public wrong. And I don't believe in blind faith in the government. Government is just human beings like us. And every one of those people, if you single them out and talk to them in a room, one-on-one, all of them, regardless of your politics, are normal, decent human beings. They have families, children, wives, husbands. So I don't really subscribe to there's the us and them sort of thinking. I understand, like, I'm a military guy. I am one of Uncle Sam's extremists. I've had to accept that moniker by virtue of my chosen profession, right? So I can't say that everything that I say and think and do matches up with the general population. However, I'm also able to balance out, okay, I see when we need to do more extreme things, when we need to do more measured things. And I would hope that everybody out there is looking for a greater good, because at the end of the day, America is a single ship and we're all in the same boat. And I think we all like it when our boat floats, right?
Well, you and I do, and our audience does, but I think there's overwhelming evidence that a lot of people running the government, high levels, even General Mark Milley, for example, are really working to protect China and not America. Not everybody wants America to float, it seems, but that's my take. You know, you're very diplomatic. I can tell you're a peacemaker. You can bring people together. You can find common ground. And that's a very valuable trait, especially in times of strife and chaos. That brings me to your counseling experience. Are you currently practicing as a counseling?
No, I don't practice. I specifically don't practice because I don't want to. I had an end state objective ultimately to get my PhD in the repatriation of child soldiers after wars where they experienced conflict. But then I got redirected in life. And so now I just use my family counseling on a personal level to mentor young kids when they're talking about joining the military or figuring out a path forward, which makes me double back on another point you brought up. I do believe there is a difference in the younger kids today from the older kids, such as ourselves and before. And I think a big thing that I see across most cultures in a modern era is we lack what I call a rites of passage. There's really not a point in time where you say, okay, now I go through this hardship and now all of a sudden I'm a young man or I'm a young woman. And I think that helps human beings identify themselves a little bit. And I would say that that's lacking, but there are other ways that can go about it, like getting a degree or going into the military or, getting married or getting their first job, buying the first home. So, but yes, to answer you briefly, yes, I'm very much a centrist, very much like to seek balance. I've seen 9 different conflicts. I've seen the horrors that come with it. If it can be avoided at all costs, I'm all about it.
Yeah, that's a really important perspective to bring to the table. That's why I'm glad to be able to have this conversation with you, and a frank conversation where we might not agree on all the interpretations, but we can find common ground and we can inform people and empower people with the skills that they need to survive whatever is happening with whatever point of view they have. I want to remind the viewers, your book is called Hawke's Green Beret Survival Manual. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, booksellers everywhere. Website is mykelhawke.com, and Mykel is spelled M-Y-K-E-L. It's a unique spelling, M-Y-K-E-L, Hawke with an E on the end of it, .com. We've got about 5 minutes left here, Mykel, for this segment. So what do you think are the areas where people are, let's say, not paying attention enough to their preparedness, that they could easily make progress with very little effort right now while times are still basically functioning?
I would say the biggest things that people neglect, most people think about what they know, the food, water, fire, shelter, right? The medicine, that's such a big one. Get some medical training, get some medical gear, get some medical supplies, right? That you can use both for illnesses and injuries for everyone in your household, including your pets and animals, right? The other one is communications. Everybody relies so much on their cell phone and their internet. But what about when that goes down? Some family radios, HF radio, CB radio, something that allows you to reach out and find out what's going on. Even a shortwave, so you can just listen to the international news when all the power is out, is a very handy thing. And then, of course, navigation is a big one, because the number one question people have in a major disaster is, do I stay or do I go? And a simple answer is, if it's safe to stay, stay. You got more stuff and you can be found more easily. If not, you got to go. That's the part. Where are you going to go? How are you going to get there? How long is it going to take? How are you going to refuel? Where are you going to get your food, water supplies along the way? So those are the three things I tell people: communication, navigation, and medicine. Give those some attention and you'll be well served.
That's a really good point, because people talk a lot about bugging out and having a bug out bag. I know people who live in cities, and sometimes they've told me, well, I've got my vehicle stocked, I got my bug out bag in my vehicle, I'm going to bug out as soon as I hear the news of whatever. And I'm thinking, how do you know you're not too late? Because a vehicle on a road, roads are checkpoints or choke points. You've seen this in other countries. Bugging out, how risky is it really?
Oh man, it's extremely risky because you got to remember, whenever anything happens, no matter how much preparation and planning you have done, there are going to be a lot of people who haven't done any of that. And their sole plan is going to be to prey on those people who've done the preparation. And so that then opens up a whole nother philosophical thing. What are you going to do when you encounter that? How far are you willing to go? How far are you willing to let them go before you take some drastic action that could be life-changing?
I'm really glad you brought that up. I've had this conversation many, many times with many of my different instructors, in firearms and martial arts and whatever. It seems like there's a criminal element of society. Most of them have done hard time, convicted felons. They never hesitate to commit violence against you to get what they want. But good people, moral people, it seems like they always hesitate unless they've had training to know not to. So aren't they at quite a disadvantage unless they've gone through some exercises or training?
Well, I mean, it's one of those things where I've seen a lot of good people do a lot of bad things. For example, everybody's up in arms about the whole Afghanistan, Kabul falling and all that kind of stuff. I've been in those situations before. I was in the fall of Freetown, Sierra Leone. And in that situation, they came in and slaughtered 6,000 people, chopped them up, burned them alive. I mean, it was horrific, right? And so I try to not think about it because I can't unsee it. So my point to everybody is, there's always going to be bad people, and there's going to be sometimes good people driven to feel like they're justified to do bad things. Each person has to ask themselves, if encountered, what am I going to do about it? How far am I willing to go? And you got to make that, personal decision. Is this a bad guy who's always planning to just rob me? Or is this somebody who's really struggling and desperate? Maybe I can work with them and help them out a little bit. And they can help me out a little bit. But those are risky, dangerous calls, and only the person in the moment can make it.
Well, it's kind of like you said, if you're not bugging out, if you're staying home and staying safe, you're not going to have those encounters probably. I mean, bugging out invites the risk of many, many encounters, even road, carjackings, for example, or if you're bugging out in an RV, RV is a big, fat, juicy supply target, right?
Absolutely. And all of those things. When you're mobile, you're vulnerable, right? When you're static, you have a little bit more security, but that doesn't mean someone's not going to try to penetrate your perimeter, right?
Right, but in that case, of course, then if they're kicking in your door, the decision's already been made, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's very, very clear at that point. You don't have to ask, is this a good guy just looking to borrow salt?
That's it.
Right. Okay, we're down to about less than a minute. Final thoughts for this segment, Mykel. What would you like to leave people with from your knowledge here?
I just tell everybody, hey, survival is a universal thing. Whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, whatever you got, make it a point to study it from the perspective of not only yourself, but your loved ones. And once you start viewing it through that lens, it will really open your aperture and you really start finding a lot of solutions.
All right. That's very good. Excellent advice from Mykel Hawke here, author of Hawke's Green Beret Survival Manual, available at booksellers everywhere. Folks, check it out. A lot of practical information that can help you get through whatever's coming. And, it's your decision on what you think's coming. But survival skills are universally applicable. So check it out. Thank you for watching. I'm Mike Adams, Brighteon.tv. All right, we're going to continue then, Mykel, for a few more minutes. That was the main broadcast for the network. So we've gone into some really interesting areas here already. We haven't yet gone into firearms for self-defense. So if it's okay, I'd like to ask you about that. And I'll start with the question. I've encountered many, many people over the years who own a firearm and that's it. And they think, oh, I got a gun in the closet, I got a revolver, right? What would you say to those people who are gun owners but not proficient in using them? How do they get proficient? What's the path here?
I mean, the first decision everyone has to make is, hey, do I want a gun or not? Now you've made the decision, you have a gun. It's a tool. It's like anything else. You got to practice with it. You got to use it. I recommend to everybody at least once a year, pull your weapon out, disassemble it, clean it up, put it together, take it to the range, get familiar with the feel of it, the sound of it, do an inventory on your ammunition. And most importantly, train your family and everybody else that you care about how to use it. And if you plan to use it in your home environment, do some drills, do some rehearsals in your home. Where are you going to tell your family to go if there's some break-in or something, so that you've got a clear line of fire and you're not worried about shooting through the wall and heaven forbid you hurt your loved ones. So just take some time and use the tool every once in a while and rehearse how you're going to use it every once in a while, at least once a year minimum.
That's great advice. And firearm sales have been very high, sustained high sales for the last couple of years. By some estimates, I've read there are as many as 500 million firearms in America right now. And of course, I'm a Texan, so I always joke, it's like, most of those are here. But I'm pretty sure my neighbors have a big chunk of that. There are firearms everywhere. And yet, when I saw a recent video of law enforcement encountering some felonious shooters, this guy popped out of a car with an AR pistol and started shooting at sheriff's deputies. And he was just literally doing this action, like jerking the pistol and firing off rounds, didn't even have sight alignment, no sight picture, nothing. He was doing that. So even people who seem to use maybe guns a lot, they don't necessarily have skills in them either.
Well, let me just say two things. One, I'm outside of being a Florida National paramedic and a FCC radio operator, I'm also a deputy sheriff. And I've been shot at, particularly in Africa, by people who use those TTPs, techniques, tactics, and procedures, like shooting over the berm or dancing while they're shooting. And I love it because I've had a dozen guys shoot at me from 100 meters, and I swore, okay, I'm dead, it's over. And then their magazines are empty. They didn't hit a darn thing. And then I just start dropping and popping, and they start running away. So anytime I encounter someone shooting like that, I smile, take cover, and I wait for my chance to, end the situation. It's a good thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Very, very, very good words of wisdom. And also, I think the empowering message from this is that you, I'm saying you to the viewer, if you're disciplined, if you have some training, and if you follow an instructor to know how to operate a firearm correctly, get the correct sight picture, handle recoil correctly, practice some reloads, you are more proficient than most people in the country very quickly, I would say. Yes.
Gun control.
Yeah, exactly. That's the first thing I tell people, right? I mean, come on, get your finger off the trigger. Let's put it on the slide. Let's do this right. Okay. Aside from firearms, let's talk about communications just for a few minutes. Do you have a recommended two-way radio or radio system that might be useful among, let's say, a neighborhood watch or families living in close proximity?
That's an interesting question. I'm a big believer in the HF radio because I can use a very simple antenna and I could talk around the world and listen around the world. Everybody would have to figure out what their comfort level is and what their budgets are for that type of thing. You can get those little family held radios, CB radios. You can actually get the marine band radios, which get a little bit farther range. And those are best in a close proximity if you have neighbors and neighborhood that you can trust people within the neighborhood. Yeah, right. So it's sort of a dilemma because by letting other people know what you have, then it might make you a target, but it also could be that if you guys have a trusting relationship, that you can rely on them for medicine, they can rely on you for ammunition, you can rely on another for food. So I do very much support the community coming together, and the various radios that are out there on the market are pretty much all they need for whatever the distances are that they need to cover.
Okay, great answer. It's funny, I just purchased a book on HF radios to try to add that to my understanding of what I'm doing. Boy, the world of radio communications gets incredibly complex very quickly.
Yes, it does.
I bought a chart of all the frequencies that are licensed by the FCC. You know, that chart is a big wall chart, and it's checkerboarded with everything. I couldn't believe it.
It is amazing, but so that it's not overwhelming, people should just realize they pretty much need HF for long distance, FM for short distance, and then figure out what they can afford, and they'll be good to go.
Okay. All right. Great advice. Okay. And then finally on food, I know you're well trained in survival techniques. Talk about wildcrafting a little bit. Can people find food, you know, if they've got forests around them? What kind of training should they get? You know, hopefully they have their own food supply, but there's a lot of food in the wild. I mean, I live on a ranch in Texas, and I identified, I think, 9 sources of wild food just growing. It's going to take work to get them, but they're out there.
And I think that's a really important thing. I mean, outside of having your own stockpile for however long you think you need to go and however many people, you need to learn what's in your region where you live that's edible, how to identify it. And the secret is how to identify it year round through all 4 seasons, right? When it has flowers, when it's all shriveled up and it's wintertime, what roots you can get after. But the biggest thing I tell people is, man, turn your home into your own farm and your own ranch. If you can have chickens, rabbits, you know, grow whatever plants you can, as many as you can that grow in your environment that can sustain you, that is just such a powerful tool. Plus, the more they do that, the more you become in touch with nature and earth, and you understand the whole life cycle. And it just makes you, I think, more appreciative of everything in life. And I think that makes you a better human being. So the more you can do to grow food at home is better.
Well, great advice, Mykel. And I want to thank you. Number one, I honor your service, and I honor you as a human being. I want to thank you for sharing your perspective, which I would categorize as perhaps more optimistic about humanity than my own view, and that's okay. I've been kind of jaded over the last couple of years watching things, but you know what? What you bring to the table is very important. Ultimately, we all have to heal, don't we? Because we got to live with each other, right?
Amen. And this is important. Like right now, I work for Special Operations Command, right? The year before, I did combat search and rescue in Afghanistan for State Department. So I'm fairly current on my operations and on my strategic stuff right now. And I've got a lot of brothers that I strongly disagree with, and they strongly disagree with me. But it doesn't change the fact that they're my fellow American, that they're my brother, that they're good people. And so whatever we're going through right now, if everybody has a mind towards finding common ground, then we can find common ground. And until we find that, it's that whole thing. I just remind people, united we stand, you know the rest.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for that. And just to let you know, I want to see this republic survive all of these global threats. America is the greatest experiment in geopolitics in the history of the world. We've created more abundance. We have saved more people. We have created opportunities and more inventions and discoveries than any nation in the history of the world, as far as I'm concerned. And that's why it's worth protecting. So
on that note, Mike, that's why we got to survive this period of division. We have to survive it so we can continue to be the beacon of democracy for everyone. There are a lot of people looking at us right now, and if we fall apart, then basically the experiment of democracy is done. And you already got China and Russia in the wings saying, look, they're not doing so good. Why do you want that government? You should have us, just because we tell you everything to do and we kill you if you don't. So I'm like, hey, people, just remember, we're all in the same boat. Let's row together.
Yeah, that's right. Well said. That's why I even tell people, if you're going to go publicly protest something, vaccine mandates, January 6th prisoners, whatever, leave your weapons at home, folks. Leave your weapons at home. Be peaceful, carry a sign, right? But you don't need knives and pepper spray and firearms with you, because you're just going to get called an insurrectionist and probably charged with something pretty serious. So leave your weapons at home, folks. Be peaceful. Peace is how we win this. And thank you, Mykel Hawke, for joining me today. It's been an honor, sir, to have you on.
Thank you, Mike.
All right. Take care then. And folks, again, his book is Hawke's Green Beret Survival Manual, available booksellers everywhere. And his website is mykelhawke.com. And thank you for watching today. Feel free to repost this video anywhere that you'd like. Get the word out. We're all about that. Open source information and interviews, empowering people with knowledge. Thank you for watching. I'm Mike Adams, the founder of Brighteon.com. Take care. Survival Nutrition is our new free audiobook that you can download right now from survivalnutrition.com. In this nearly 8-hour audiobook, you will learn life-saving secrets of how to use food, nutrients, plant molecules, trace minerals, and chemical compounds to save your life, even in a total collapse scenario. I'm Mike Adams, the Health Ranger, and I'm the author of Survival Nutrition. I founded and run a multi-million-dollar food science laboratory, and I'm the author of the best-selling science book, Food Forensics. I'm also a prepper, a patriot, and a survivalist. I can teach you how to survive what's coming by growing your own food, medicine, and antibiotics that can help keep you healthy and alive even during the worst of times. At survivalnutrition.com, you'll be able to instantly download the full free audiobook as MP3 files. Keep a copy of all these files on your local hard drive and print out the full guide, just in case we lose the power grid. survivalnutrition.com.